glad you're here. I'm Eric Williams. I'm not Chris. So some of you are getting somewhat used to me being up here, but it's still very new to me each time, so I apologize for any nervousness. But I'm really glad you're here this morning. We're going to continue our series, Grave Robber. This is our sixth sign that we're going to be looking at this morning. And if you're a guest with us, we just want to give you a special thank you for being here. It's really, we consider that an honor for you to bless us with your presence. So thank you if you're a guest here with us today. So for the past several weeks, we've been looking at the different signs and these miracles that in the Gospel of John he gives us so that we will be better able to answer the question of who is Jesus. That's kind of the purpose behind these signs and these miracles. So we looked at Jesus turning water into wine, healing a servant's son. He healed a paralytic man and told him to take up his mat and walk. He fed the great multitude with some loaves of bread and some fish. Last week, Chris walked us through Jesus walking on water and how in our lives when we have storms that Jesus is there, he's present, he knows, and that he offers peace. So we're just continuing that this morning as we look at Jesus healing a man born blind. So whether you've been through the series a lot or this is your first Sunday with us, I'm really excited about this passage of Scripture. I'm excited about what Jesus has been showing me and revealing to me, and I'm really pumped about just getting the opportunity and the privilege to share it with y'all. So with that, I want to read John 20, 30, and 31. And this is kind of the spoiler for why John says these miracles have been recorded. He says, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." So that's kind of the purpose behind this whole series. And that's our prayer for us as well this morning, that we more clearly see Jesus and that by believing in who he is, we experience more of the life that he desires to give us. So I do want to pray for our time and just ask God to bless it. Father, thank you for the way you love us. We thank you that you are truly worthy of worship. I ask now that you would just help me, calm my nerves, help me to speak clearly about who Jesus is, that your Spirit would open our eyes so that we can see you more and more clearly. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. So if you have your Bible, if you have an app, if you want to open it up to John 9, that's kind of where we're going to be for most of the morning. And while you're turning there, while you're getting there, I just kind of want to give us some context for what Jesus has been happened in his day so far. It kind of starts off in John 8:12. Jesus says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And so this whole incident that we're about to get to really starts in John 8:12, and there's an ongoing discussion and dialogue between Jesus, the Pharisees. There's dispute, there's debate, there's conflict, and all that's carrying through all of 8 and then into 9. And in the end of 8, Jesus has made the claim that he is God. He's told the Pharisees, they're in the temple, and he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." And the Pharisees were furious at this because when Jesus made that claim, before Abraham was, I am. Jesus is making a reference to what God had told Moses in the way God described himself as I am. He told Moses, "I am that I am." And so the Pharisees saw this as blasphemy. They saw this as wrong. And they actually picked up stones and they were ready to kill Jesus. So I'm going to start reading in John 8:59, and then we're going to read all the way into John 9:1-7. It says, so they, the Pharisees, picked up stones to throw at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. So that's our story. That's where we're going to be diving in today. But I want us, before we get there, I want us to just take a minute to think about this guy, this blind guy. He says he's been blind from birth. And that's just crazy for us if we have sighted people to think about the concept of never being able to see. This man had no concept of sight. He had never seen anything. And for us, for people with sight, vision is by far the most important of our senses. Vision is the primary sense in which we experience all of life. Researchers kind of estimate that 80 to 85% of all our perception, all of our learning, all of our cognition, all of our activities, that's all happening through vision. So it's by far the most important of the senses. And this guy never had that. He didn't have the benefit of having Braille. He didn't have the benefit of the many resources that are now available for people who are blind. He didn't have any of that. So this is a really crippling disability for this man. In fact, we'll see later that because of his blindness, he's also a beggar. That'll be revealed in the scripture to come. So I just want you to kind of think about that. Think about how much we rely on our sight. Just in your getting ready this morning, all from getting out of bed to taking a shower, to everything you grab, your hand-eye coordination, eyes are working with your brain and working with your body so that it all flows. And we don't even think about that. It just all happens naturally. And this guy didn't have that. Even now, many of you, your vision is helping us communicate. As I look at you, I can see if you're tracking with me. I can see if I said something really stupid and kind of get the weird look. I better say that again. Vision helps even in our communication. This guy didn't have that. And so for us, the closest thing that we can come to kind of put ourselves in that position of blindness would probably be darkness. Have any of you ever really been in the dark? I mean, like real darkness. Like maybe somebody, have you gone into, inside of a cave kind of dark? Anybody? Any cavers, spelunkers? One. Okay. All right. Next illustration. So maybe a couple. They'll see. Really? Now you got to go inside the cave where the bats are, not just at the mouth. Joyce, I'm watching. All right. So that's probably the closest we can actually come to experience or get a sense of what blindness is. Now, our eyes are working in the dark, but there's just nothing to see, right? And so it's taken that sight away from us. Or how about this? Maybe, so not a lot of cavers. How about you wake up in the middle of the night and you gotta go to the bathroom and it's dark? Now, yeah? Now that's a dangerous kind of darkness right there. All right? In fact, I'm gonna tell myself, and we'll have to edit this part out if it goes online because I'm not sure I'm ready to take that step of embarrassment. But I was like a senior in high school. I might have even been in my first year at community college. So I was not a little kid. I was on up there. And so my parents had like a split four-year house. And so half the house was in the basement. And my room was not really a bedroom by code because it didn't have windows. Because I guess my parents really loved me a lot and stuck me down there. So that's where I was at. When I closed my door, it got dark. It got dark. And so one night, I slept well, I guess. And the thing was, I think I must have done some like gymnastics while I was asleep. Like I was turning somersaults and stuff and rolling around. Because anybody else do that? Like you might go to bed and like laying down, in the right position, but you wake up, you don't know where you're going to be, right? Well, see, that's kind of what I did, and so I woke up and I had to pee pretty bad, and so I made the correct motion, like I went this way, but there was a wall there, and it was confusing, so I was like what? And all of a sudden, like my bearings weren't right, and I was confused. And I was like, but I really gotta pee, so I'm like, start like kind of groping around, like what's happening? Kicking over the chair to my desk, like, my shin. Like, well then it gets to the point where like I'm peeing on myself because I cannot find the door and I cannot find the light switch. And you guys are laughing. Come on, guys. I was sharing that from here. Man, it hurts. No. But finally, I get a trash can, finish that, okay, then find the light. And it's like everything that I thought that was really wasn't. I was all turned around. So I bring that up just to say that darkness is not a good place to stay. You'll end up peeing all over yourself. That probably should be the bottom line for today. So don't write that down. But I do want to point out that darkness is not a good place to do life. It's not a good place to stay. And some of you, at different times in your life, maybe you really have felt that way. Maybe you have felt like you're in some type of darkness. And so I want to share good news with you, that Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So we don't have to stay in the dark, okay? Try to keep that verse in mind, that John 8:12. We'll keep coming back to that a little bit. But we're going to jump back. We're going to transition back to our text. So we're going to start again in John 8:59. That's the very last verse of 8. And then we're going to read the first verse of 9, okay? So they, the Pharisees, picked up stones to throw at Jesus. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. Jesus had just left a situation where they were ready to kill him, right? That's where he was at. And then, as soon as he walks by, he encounters a man. He sees a man who's been blind from birth. To me, this is like an amazing transition, just to kind of think about. It was more than just like a glance as he walked by, but it's like he pauses and he kind of like locks eyes on him. Because there's a whole dialogue that happens right there in front of the guy. And so Jesus sees the man. He really sees him. He sees him with compassion. He sees him with mercy. He's really looking at him. He's engaging him. Now, there were stones not that far away. And yet Jesus is aware of who is around him. He notices the people around him. So that's the first thing in your handout. Jesus always sees the people around him. He doesn't get flustered like we do. He doesn't get distracted. He's always on mission with God, from one situation to the next. Even those are like super contrasting, right? And so that's kind of like, it's really challenging to me as a follower of Christ. Like what would my verse 1 look like? What would your verse 1 look like if you were in Jesus' position? You thought about that? Like, you're in the temple. Hey, Jesus is God, guys. No way, like picking up stones. You leave the temple, verse 1. What does that look like? For me, my verse 1 is like, and Eric sprinted by, not noticing any blind people because he's only thinking about himself. Like that's the way we get distracted, right? And so it's just amazing to me that Jesus, that's not the way he does. He's always on mission from one situation to the next. And so even though we're easily distracted, our comfort gets threatened, our security is compromised, and we easily forget what our purpose is. We forget the mission that we've been given. And so too often we might go through life passing by real people with real needs. And I'm missing it. I'm not walking like Jesus walked. And I was thinking about this, and even our culture has kind of like reinforced that passing by. That idea of just like going through life and not really noticing who's around us. It's like, this boggles my mind now, but like, it is culturally acceptable and normal to walk down the street like this. Like, who knows what's happening, like, all around us, but our sight is not on the people around us, but our sight is, maybe a cell phone or texting or whatever. Like, so it's culturally acceptable to kind of not be aware of the people around us. I was thinking about one of our common greetings is, how you doing? Like, how you doing? How you doing? And then nobody actually says how they're doing. Like, have you ever thought about just how like bizarre that is? How you doing? How are you doing? And then that's it. Hey. And nobody's really engaging with each other. We're not pressing in. We're not noticing. We're not wanting to relate as people created in the image of God. So, eye contact. There's a lot of simple things that I feel like, using someone's name, calling a person by their name. Like, it's crazy. I think sometimes I feel like the creeper because I make eye contact and I try to use somebody's name, and then people don't trust me. Like we have a server, or we're going through a fast food restaurant, and they give me something, and I'm like, hey, thanks. And they'll have a name tag, and I might use their name, and they're like, get out of here. I don't know about you. Like, culture is like, we've gotten to the point where it's really acceptable to just pass by and not really notice people. But I bring this up because that's not Jesus. That's not Jesus. He sees. And when he sees, he doesn't just see with his eyes, but he's also seeing with his heart. And so that's a challenge to me, but that's also a challenge to us as the church. We want to walk as Jesus walked. So, as Jesus passed by, he sees the people around him. We want to do the same. So back to verse 1. Jesus saw a man blind from birth. Now, this man was in physical darkness, but also spiritual darkness. And while we might not be in physical darkness, we're all born into spiritual darkness. Sin, we are separated from God. Spiritually, we are in the domain of darkness, is what the Bible refers to that as. Like, we're spiritually blind, we're spiritually dark, and we're in need. So the things that are happening for this man physically is also pointing to something that's true for all spiritually. Okay? So physical darkness is bad. That's a terrible thing that some people are having to deal with. But spiritual darkness is eternally worse. Physical darkness is bad, but spiritual darkness is eternally worse. But there's good news. Notice verse 1. Jesus saw a man blind from birth. Jesus sees us while we are still in darkness. Jesus sees us while we are still in darkness. That's on your handout. Jesus engages us while we're still in darkness. He has compassion on us, even in the midst of our sin. Even when we are totally not aware of him, Jesus has his eyes on you. Jesus is watching you. And the thing is, he's looking at you not just in a state of apathy, but of real compassion and with a plan and a purpose. He's looking at you in a way that is inviting you out of that darkness. So I want you to think about that. I don't know what the darkest time in your life might have looked like, or where that's at for you, or if you feel like you're in a dark place even now. Jesus sees you. He knows you. He's aware of whatever that is, whatever that thing is that you might be struggling with. He sees it. And he still loves you. He still has a plan for you. He has given you an invitation to get out of the dark. He lovingly invites us out of darkness and into light. John 8:12. I'm going to say it so many times, y'all might memorize it today. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. That's an invitation. That's an invitation. And that brings us to our bottom line. And this is just the gospel. Jesus went into darkness so that you could come into light. Jesus went into darkness so that you could come into light. This is what we celebrate on Easter next week. Hope you're going to be able to come. It's going to be an awesome time. We're going to celebrate a lot. If you have a friend, we totally encourage you to bring them, invite somebody. But that's what we're celebrating, that Jesus has gone in. He's taken on our darkness. And now he offers and invites us to share in his light. That's the trade that Jesus offers to us. On the cross, he laid down his life and he took up our death. He was buried. He went into the dark on our behalf. And he was raised to life so that we can join him in his light, the light of life. You don't have to stay in the dark. Jesus has invited you into his light. I'm gonna jump down to 6 and 7, the healing of the blind man. So it might come up here, John 9, verses 6 and 7. I'm going to read that again. It says, having said these things, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The healing of the blind man was a very important miracle because it had already been prophesied from Isaiah about the coming Messiah. And I'm really surprised I said that right. When I was practicing, I couldn't say Isaiah and Messiah in the same sentence. But it had been spoken of. 600 years before Christ came, Isaiah says, when the Messiah comes, this is what he's going to be about. And part of that is he's going to recover the sight of the blind. And Jesus actually reads this in Luke 4. He's at synagogue one morning, and it was his turn to read and give him the scroll of Isaiah, and he reads out of Luke 4, verse 18 and 19. I had that marked. Okay. It says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. This is Jesus reading this, but it's written down already. All right. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and the recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And he rolled up the scroll and said, today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. He's saying, that's what I'm about. That's my ministry. That's me that Isaiah was pointing you towards. And so this healing of the blind man is a very important miracle because it's been expected. It's been expected. So in 6 and 7, Jesus anoints the man's eyes with mud and sent him to go wash in a pool named Sent. So this is it. We kind of think, why did he spit on the ground and put that in his eyes? That's gross. Why did he make a blind man walk somewhere? That's just mean. Like, there's a lot of like, what is this about? But when we kind of realize what all's taking place here, it's actually awesome because it's all pointing back to Jesus. So in Luke 4, what we just read, it says that he is the anointed one. Jesus is the one who has been sent. So check this out. The blind man was sent to a pool by the one who was sent to give sight to the blind. It's like Jesus is like laying down clues. Like, can you figure it out? Connect the dots. Come on. Like, you'd have to be blind to... Oh, wait. That was probably bad. Not a good joke. Okay. But he's laying down pretty massive clues so that this guy can realize what all's happening here. Also, the pool was called, in Jewish tradition, was also referred to as the Messiah's pool. Messiah literally means anointed one. So check this out. Jesus, the anointed one, anointed the blind man's eyes, sent him to a place that was traditionally known as the anointed one's pool. Right? Big clues. We could get this, right? And so he's doing this in a loving way so that not just this man can figure out who Jesus is, but that others would see what's happening, that it's all a fulfillment of something much bigger, right? And then it just gets even better. That even after the miracle has taken place, we get to actually watch this guy who now has his sight, his physical sight is restored. We actually get to watch his spiritual sight come to life. So we'll watch this play out. This man's like, it's like his progression in faith. So I'm going to read some verses. This is verse 8 through 12 if you're following along. It says, the neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. He kept saying, I am the man. So they said to him, then how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. And they said to him, where is he? He said, I do not know. So at that point, in this guy's spiritual sight, he refers to Jesus as a man. The man called Jesus. But then watch what happens. So word gets out, hey, somebody just received their sight. That's a big deal in a small... If that happened in Erwin, you would probably know pretty quick, right? Word gets out, right? The grapevine is strong here. We'll just say that, right? So that's what's happening. And before you know it, the Pharisees, the most religious elite, come on the scene, right? And here's the thing. They should have known Isaiah's prophecy. They should have been the most excited. They were the ones who were more educated. They would have literally known that if somebody received their sight, that's supposed to mean that the Messiah has come. But they were not excited. Their heart was not in the right place. Instead of being excited, they were very scared and defensive, and they wanted to put Jesus down, like they've been trying to do from the start. So 13 through 17 says, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. Time out. So apparently it was a breaking of the Sabbath when Jesus made the mud. Like, you're not supposed to knead dough, mud, or clay on the Sabbath, right? So that's what's going on. Like, that's how nitpicky they are. Like, they totally ignore the fact that a blind guy received sight. A miracle's happened. They're like, no, That's bad. Like, I'm going to poo-poo this. We're not happy. Like, that's what's happening here. It's totally ridiculous. So they're focused on their rules and regulations. But then, so they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him since he has opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." So now he's kind of has this idea that, okay, Jesus is more than just a man. He's a prophet, right? Well, then the Pharisees, I'm going to paraphrase a big chunk of this. Pharisees go fact check the blind guy's parents because, like, man, this is just a hoax. And they talk to the parents. The parents are like, hey, that's our son. He was born blind. We don't know what happened. Talk to him. We're scared. Like, we don't want to get thrown out of church or out of the synagogue. And so we're just going to, like, stay at arm's length on this thing. And so then the Pharisees go round 2 and interrogate this same guy again. And this time he's kind of defending Jesus. He's like, I don't think Jesus is a sinner, y'all, because God listened to him and opened my eyes. I once was blind and now I see. Right? Like, something's happened. Do y'all not get it? And he says this in the midst of that. He says, if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. So now this guy's kind of realized this guy's from God, right? He's not just a man. He's not just a prophet. He's from God. And then the Pharisees throw him out. They excommunicate the blind guy when he was having the best day of his life, right? I mean, he just got his sight back and he gets thrown out of church. Like, religious people, right? Isn't that how it goes? All right, so 35. Jesus hears that he had been thrown out. That's where we're going to pick it up. So 35, turn the page. All right. Jesus heard that they had cast him out. And having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered him, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. What a powerful conclusion to this story. From him viewing Jesus as a man to a prophet, as someone from God, to now, Lord, I believe, I worship you. Right? This man has now been healed, not just physically, but spiritually. He has spiritual sight. He is now seeing Jesus clearly for who he is. And I love what Jesus says. He says, "You have seen him." Jesus had healed his eyes that day, and now he's saying, your eyes are working so that you can see who I am. And what does that do? Of course, that's going to lead to worship. Last thing on your handout says, seeing Jesus will transform your life and your worship. This guy started the day physically and spiritually blind, but finished the day seeing Jesus clearly. I once was blind, but now I see. And so you see, that's our hope here at Northridge. Our hope is that we would be a people, we would be the church, and that we would be continually growing in our vision of who he is, who Christ is. And that would infiltrate all the places in my heart, all the dark places that are in my heart. Realize we all got blind spots, places that we don't even realize are dark. And Jesus already sees that and loves us and has a plan to shine light in there, right? That's good news, y'all. So my question to you is what does it look like for us as the church to be a people who's committed to shining light out into the dark places in our community? What does that look like? What does it look like for us to intentionally bring light to the darkness of our area? That's what Christ has called us to. Let the light of Christ shine from you this week. Let it shine to the people that you see, the people that you notice as you pass by. That we would be a people that are willing to stop and pause and engage as we see real people with real needs. Right? So, remembering that that Christ has seen us while we were in darkness, and he's opened our eyes so that we can see him, the light of